Revolution made me curious about AEW, and Double or Nothing made me understand why it works. This wasn't my first AEW pay-per-view anymore. I had watched Dynamite, started watching Collision, followed Dynasty, learned the factions, the champions, the rhythms. I understood what I was watching in a way that I didn't with Revolution. And Double or Nothing gave me almost every version of AEW in one night. After WrestleMania 42, WWE had lost me completely, and that's a whole other video. But this video isn't really about WWE, it's about the promotion that filled that space. When I first made my AEW video, I genuinely didn't know what to expect. The production quality wasn't the best, the audio was awful, and it was only my second proper video essay. But AEW fans, you guys showed up in the comments in a way that I hadn't seen before. They welcomed me, gave me homework, classic matches to watch, storylines to follow, context I was missing. They corrected things I was wrong about without being condescending about it. They treated me like a new viewer that's worth investing in. And this told me something about the fan base, and it made me take AEW way more seriously. So I had been watching Dynamite, I watched Dynasty, and when I stopped watching WWE after WrestleMania, I suddenly had extra hours in my week. And so I started watching Collision too. I started learning the factions properly, the Don Callis family, the Death Riders, the Ops. I started understanding the Owen Hart tournament, the Continental title structure, the way AEW builds its big shows differently from the way WWE does. So I kept watching Dynamite. I watched Dynasty. AEW became the wrestling product that I was thinking about between shows. Dynasty was good too, but it was not Revolution level for me. Revolution had that high octane feeling of discovering something new for the first time for me. Dynasty was still a great pay-per-view by any standards, except for AEW ones, which are very high, but it was still very good. And Double or Nothing felt like the culmination of the journey that I had been on over these last 2 months. I'll say it straight, I don't think there was a single bad match on Double or Nothing. If I had to pick the weakest match, it would probably be Mina Shirakawa versus Athena, but that was still very good. When the floor is that high, you're doing something right. Was it better than Revolution? Absolutely it was, but for me, Revolution hit harder because it was my first AEW pay-per-view experience. Everything landed fresh. By Double or Nothing, I knew more of what to expect, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't one of the best pay-per-views that I had watched live. And it showed me something that Revolution couldn't show me because I didn't have enough context. Double or Nothing showed me the full range of what AEW can do in one night. Violent tag storytelling, international dream matches, tournament stakes, physical, hardcore style wrestling, a dream match between two of my favorite wrestlers, a styles clash that somehow felt completely natural, a women's world title fatal 4-way, camping wrestling brawl, and a world title main event with a story told entirely through exhaustion and desperation. That range is the point, and I'll come back to it. AEW started Double or Nothing by immediately rewarding attention. FTR versus Adam Copeland and Christian Cage in an I Quit match is exactly what that stipulation is supposed to feel like. That storyline has been one of my favorites since Copeland came back. The rated R superstar absolutely still has it. Beth Phoenix getting involved was a great moment. Cope and Cage winning the tag titles feels like the right payoff to months of storytelling. And then Konosuke Takeshita versus Kanuchika Okada happened. I'm sorry for butchering that pronunciation. But I'll be honest, I was not deeply invested in the storyline going in. I knew the characters, but I didn't have the history with them, and I didn't connect with them the way long-term AEW fans have. But then the match started and I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. It was spectacular. By the time Takeshita won the international title and Kyle Fletcher turned on him, I was fully locked into a story I barely knew going in. That's AEW at its most effective. The match itself did the storytelling. I didn't need 5 months of investment to care about what was happening. The bell rang and they made me care about it through the wrestling. The first hour of Double or Nothing reminded me of how quickly AEW can make a show feel like an event without needing a single celebrity involvement or a variety show segment. One of the things that I've come to appreciate the most about AEW is the Owen Hart tournament. The concept is simple. Win the tournament and earn a title shot at All In. But what that structure does for the card is significant. Instead of one marquee title match decided weeks in advance, you get multiple meaningful matches leading up to it. The tournament brackets create stakes around matches that otherwise would feel random, and the whole thing is tied to a real foundation, the Owen Hart Foundation, which gives it weight beyond just wrestling. The Royal Rumble is an iconic spectacle. The Owen feels like a tournament with actual weight behind it. Mina Shirakawa vs Athena was a part of that tournament, and even the shorter matches on this show had purpose behind them. Jon Moxley defending the Continental Championship against Kyle O'Reilly looked on paper like a match that was there to give Moxley something to do, but O'Reilly surviving Mox was a compelling enough threat, and by the end, the in-ring work had given the match its own identity. AEW often lets the match itself explain why it exists, and that is way more difficult than it sounds. Samoa Joe vs Will Ospreay was the match I was most excited for going into Double or Nothing, and it was absolutely my match of the night. Samoa Joe has been one of my favorite wrestlers. Will Ospreay has quickly become one of my favorite wrestlers in AEW since I started watching, so this was way more personal for me in a way that most matches aren't. I want to use this match to make a broader point about AEW's storytelling, because I hear people say that AEW can't tell stories, and I want to point them towards Will Ospreay's arc since Revolution. The Death Riders injure him, he has a blood feud with Jon Moxley, then the story evolves. Instead of a straightforward revenge arc, which would be way too easy to do, Ospreay ends up being trained by them, pushed by them, becoming a sharper and more dangerous version of himself through this conflict. He didn't just overcome the Death Riders, he was changed by them. This is character development told through wrestling storytelling, and it doesn't look like a WWE promo package. It plays out in the matches themselves, in the physicality, in the alliances that form and break. Ospreay vs Joe delivered everything that I wanted from it. Two wrestlers that I love in a dream match on a big stage. This is exactly what pay-per-views are supposed to feel like. Bandito vs Swerve Strickland was a clash of two very different styles of professional wrestling, and somehow it felt completely seamless. That kind of match only works when the wrestlers are good enough to meet each other where they are rather than forcing the other to work in their style. Bandito and Swerve were more than good enough. The women's fatal 4-way for the AEW Women's Championship was fantastic. It is rare to see the World Championship being defended in a fatal 4-way. The spots and near falls were genuinely great, and Tekla retaining felt right. And then there was Stadium Stampede. Going in, I'll be honest, I thought this was just gonna be one of those matches that ends up being on the card because it's that time of the year, with teams thrown together because someone needed something to do, and I didn't fully understand the stipulation going into the show. And then it started and I laughed multiple times. Kenny Omega and Chris Jericho teaming up. The intro videos going harder than they had any right to. The insane spots, the finish with everyone piling on Ricochet being simultaneously hilarious and completely satisfying. This was not prestige wrestling. This was cartoon violence with a wrestling ring somewhere in the middle, and I loved every second of it. And here's the thing, when WWE does spectacle segments, it often feels like the wrestling is being replaced by the entertainment. Stadium Stampede felt like the wrestling was the entertainment. The chaos was still wrestling chaos. The rules were still wrestling rules, loosely. It was campy and ridiculous, and it felt like the right product. AEW Has Range. That one night showed me violent tag storytelling, a technical dream match, tournament wrestling, physical championship brawl, a Styles crash, a women's fatal 4-way, and cartoonish chaos. And all of it in the same building on the same show, and none of it felt out of place. The main event started on Dynamite weeks ago when Darby Allin beat MJF for the world title. It was a short squash match essentially, and some people complained about it. I didn't have a problem with it. MJF had tried to wiggle his way out of a mandatory defense. Tony Khan wouldn't let him. Darby came in with something to prove and took the title. And that felt right for who Darby is. But what happened after is what hooked me with AEW week to week. Darby started defending the title constantly. Tommaso Ciampa, Brody King, multiple defenses in quick succession. By the time Double or Nothing came around, it felt like something like 8 defenses in 21 days or something crazy like that. The world title felt alive in a way that world titles don't often feel. Every week felt like it mattered. Every episode of Dynamite and some episodes of Collision had stakes. The story that the Double or Nothing main event told physically was simple and devastating. Darby Allin had given everything to be a fighting champion. MJF came in fresh and exploited the exhaustion, and took back what he considers his. You could see it in Darby's body language throughout the match. He kept collapsing, struggling to recover. The cost of being Darby Allin caught up to him on the biggest stage, and some of the spots were genuinely insane. Darby Allin jumping off of a scaffolding onto MJF through a table is the kind of spot that defines a pay-per-view moment. MJF winning his third world title before the age of 30 makes sense. He is AEW's guy in a way that John Cena was WWE's guy. You can argue about that, but it's hard to dispute. My concern is this: I hope AEW doesn't use MJF as a safe reset button every time the world title needs momentum or importance. Darby's reign showed that a fresh champion can make the title feel different and exciting in a way that sometimes a familiar champion can't. And now that the title is back on MJF, it almost feels like a return to factory settings. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but AEW needs to keep making room for things like Darby's reign. Unexpected and chaotic. Revolution made me curious. Dynasty kept me around. And Double or Nothing made me realize that this isn't a phase. I'm not saying AEW is perfect. I'm not saying I'm done with WWE forever. Clash in Italy is coming up, and the card looks decent. Gunther versus Cody, Brock versus Oba again. That's a card that could pull me back for one night, and maybe I'll check it out. But right now, AEW is the wrestling product that I'm thinking about following and wanting to talk about. Not because WWE is bad, but because AEW itself has earned it. Double or Nothing gave me dream matches, tournament matches, serious matches, championship drama, and campy chaos. No celebrities, no documentaries, no variety shows, just wrestling. And this is why AEW works. Thank you for watching.